Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters GX aimed to be the Duel King, released in Japan on October 13th, 2005, and released in North America as Yu-Gi-Oh! GX Duel Academy on January 10th, 2006. This was the franchise's first foray into the next generation of Yu-Gi-Oh! Post-Yugimoto, featuring the extended cast of characters from hit Yu-Gi-Oh! Television program Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. You get to be your own original character, enjoying their dueling school life, packed with story events, character sides, and of course, ample card slinging. This particular era of Yu-Gi-Oh! Was shifting the franchise tone away from darker tones of shadow games and life or death stakes for more relatable ones, like if I lose this duel, I'll be made fun of by a dork with the world's craziest pompadour for the rest of my life. This also allowed for an absolute deluge of creative flow, in terms of inventing characters and placing them in different levels of importance. If your main cast isn't defined by their possession of or relation to a magic Egyptian MacGuffin, you get to experience wonderful characters like the Duel Giant, who is actually two kids in a trench coat, or Damon, who is a Tarzan kid that decided to practice his ability to draw off the top of his deck underneath a waterfall. No wonder he never came back, all his cards are wet. Yu-Gi-Oh! GX is a wonderful program, and a really fun manga if you haven't read it, but we'll continue to talk about GX throughout this whole era of these video games. GX Duel Academy is our maiden voyage to the island of Duel Academy, the pet project of Seto Kaiba, and the site of where one young boy will eventually duel an avatar of the concept of darkness. And I couldn't be more excited! But does this game know what it takes to throw down a face down? Or perhaps even utter gotcha instead, a much better catchphrase? Let's find out here today. But first, as always, let's look at some cardboard. Maybe even you have some of these cards in a box today. The game itself had an internationally aligned set of promotional trading cards that came with your purchase of a retail copy of the game that were Elemental Hero Necroshade, Hero Ring, and Winged Kuriboh. This particular copy of Winged Kuriboh featured a special art that had a pink background and was winking back at you. What a flirt! This art has only been used 2 other times for Duelist League promos and within the Yu-Gi-Oh! Branded Advent calendar. Necroshade would see some experimentation in decks, but never really land anywhere for real. In fact, I remember it mostly for being the card I always confused Necro Gardna with, since Jaden used both. Hero Ring saw virtually no play. Hero as an archetype is full of cards like that never see any play, so at least it has company. Jump put out a single guidebook for this game that contained an ultra rare copy of Elemental Hero Mudball Man, so that's fun. This game features around 1,200 cards. God, we're really getting there, huh? And follows a modified form of the Forbidden Limited list from late 2005. This game features a storyline that essentially has some of the events from the first season of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, including Titan, the Shadow Game Duelist, Dimitri, the kid who thinks he is Yugimoto, and of course, Zane Truesdale, the face of the meme himself. Now, when I was collecting footage for this game, I used both a fresh file and a file I had from a few years ago when I was treating this game as a nightly wind-down activity. So of course, I had to name the fresh file differently from my own save file with the only name that I found appropriate. I think the roleplay elements of this title are one of the more attractive aspects it has. Being able to interact with the lovable goofballs from the show and move through the different dorm levels, Slifer Red, Ra Yellow, and Obelisk Blue, is such great fun. Moving through the dorms also has people treat you differently in text. How forward thinking. It also unlocks additional duelists for you to face as you now hang out with different people than before. Imagine that, expanding your social circle. The story events in this game are fairly limited to being stuck to just the first half of the first season of the show, so you don't even get to face off against the Shadow Riders. I mean, they even put the volcano in there. You'd figure you at least duel Night Shroud. There are some original story events in the game, however, such as one where you can duel Pharaoh the Cat. You can also accrue different duelist titles as you do better in tests and duels. These are a fun way to show progress in your dueling style, and also because I used a fire deck in the game, and one of the titles is Fiery Duelist, and to be perfectly Franklin, I don't want any other title. King of Games can get out of here. Fiery Duelist, that's the one. GX Duel Academy features some brand new features for the actual dueling part of the game, such as preferences for speed of the game and animations, as well as customizing chain window prompts. You can even set activation timings for individual cards, which is a little more complicated than it's worth, but it's really cool that they were conscious of people wanting the ability to better control when they are pressing B on controllers to dismiss all the activation prompts anyway. This feature would prove to be too much in the future, but it was pretty forward thinking at the time. This game would take the duel tutorials introduced in Nightmare Troubadour and turn them into something akin to a pop quiz or homework assignment in a duel school and call them timed duels. This format would later become duel puzzles in the World Championship titles, but here they actually affect your ability to move into Obelisk Blue, so for that reason, I've never graduated past Raw Yellow, as I find the whole system very tedious, but many people enjoy this aspect of the game. Heck, they even used a duel puzzle as a plot element in an episode of Vrains. The puzzles start off extremely simple, but eventually graduate into more complex knowledge of card effects and interaction knowledge. You have to complete an obnoxious amount of these to qualify for graduation into Obelisk Blue on exam day, but so be it. Speaking of exam day, this is actually probably the coolest feature introduced in the game. Every month your character undergoes a compulsory placement exam in which you can prove you either qualify to graduate or at least defend your current dorm placement. This is accomplished through a duel exam that has a specified condition that awards more performance points, such as needing to use a bunch of spells during the duels or a bunch of traps, and also through a written exam in which you answer multiple choice questions about Yu-Gi-Oh cards. It's like a little trivia show in your GBA game. I always loved this as a youth. You also have to complete a timed duel typically, and those are kind of here or there. But based on your performance, you can either defend your current status, graduate, or even demote back down to a lower dorm. How humiliating. They even generate a score for all of the other characters in the game, so you can feel like you really crushed local smart girl Alexis Rhodes. That's right! Explain different spell cards to me now, fool! The packs available in this game are compiled in a way that is much more friendly to the player than ever before. First of all, you gain a lot of money very quickly, as each one duel will award you at least 300 DP and usually around 400, and most packs cost around 100 to 150. Also, on any given day, you can duel between 2 and 3 times per day, meaning you're getting at least almost 7 packs out of that, I think. This means you are getting new cards at a much more steady pace than any game released previously. Good cards that will actually help you win duels are also available from the very start, including, finally, high attack normal monsters, powerful spells and traps, and even cards that form bespoke strategies. For instance, one of your possible starter decks comes with a cadre of fire attribute monsters, and you can actually keep that general theme of a fire deck going throughout the whole game and be extremely successful. The other 2 starter decks are similarly compatible throughout the entire game thanks to the amount of attribute support that existed at the time, and is powerful in a limited environment like these video games. The packs are arranged in a way that is more intuitive than previous games, but it's still too opaque for what it is. There are 4 pack 1s that all have different sets of high attack normal monsters and other sorts of helpful cards. One nice thing they do, however, is cordon off the really powerful spells and traps into their own packs, so while that does mean you're not getting a Monster Reborn out of the standard spell pack, you also have a much higher chance of actually getting Monster Reborn in the pack that does have it. That's just math, folks. The CPU duelists are able to retain most of what gave them their identity in the anime, so Cyrus will use Roids and Crowler will use Ancient Gears, but some characters have their decks amplified with more powerful staple cards such as Snatch Steel. Many characters in the anime use cards like Pot of Greed and Monster Reborn, but I'm just personally mad every time someone uses Snatch Steel in this game. Consequently, this means Cyrus could very easily Pot of Greed into Snatch Steel, into Power Bond, into Limiter Removal, and OTK you. Yeah, that's right. A computer opponent in a Yu-Gi-Oh game delivering over 8k damage on one turn. It's possible. The game did not mess around. Another thing to note here, the opponents still exhibit some of the simple behavior from other games like activating 7 tools or Magic Jammer as soon as it can, rather than having any kind of situational awareness. Most computers will also set annoying battle traps like Mirror Force and Negate Attack, prolonging you from your hard-earned 400 DP for one additional turn. Despite not being part of the World Championship titles, this game would prove to be a competent simulator of the game at a slightly higher level than normally expected for the story-based titles in the franchise. And this actually sort of exists as a turning point for the franchise in which future story-based games like Tag Force and the 2009 through 11 World Championship titles would take the player more seriously as a card game. GX Duel Academy is a great video game. Bottom line. It was the perfect compromise to rope in both halves of the potential audience. People that wanted a role-playing story like the days of yore, and also people that wanted access to the most recent card pool to have fun dueling. Surprisingly, this game got pretty lukewarm reviews. Not exactly negative, but not glowing either. Most cited the game's general difficulty, which is certainly higher than you would find in games like the Sacred Cards, and most outlets referred to it as the famous moniker, a game for fans of the genre. This is the first title in what I'm calling the second era for this franchise. From this point onward, we're going to be talking about the more interesting period of Yu-Gi-Oh's history as a card game, but leaving behind some of the more interesting design space from the early days. Is the trade-off worth it? Well, I suppose we'll just have to find out as we scurry along. Thank you so much for watching, everybody, and I'll see you in the next one.